This week on 100% Chance of Wine, we're out at Walla Canoe Ridge Vineyard, and I'm joined by Bill Murray. You're the winemaker here out at the winery. I want to first talk to you about the vineyard itself, because that's what started Canoe Ridge in the first place. Speak to me more about the history of the vineyard.
Well, the vineyard was built in 1989. It's 170 acres. It's in Horseheaven Hills. It's roughly about 80 miles west of here, right on the edge of the Columbia River. It's a beautiful vineyard, and literally from the edge of the vineyard you could look down at the Columbia River.
Now, it didn't start off with that many acres. What was the vision initially?
Well, in the beginning, there was a handful of investors that were various winemakers who now have their own wineries here in Walla. So when they did start, there was a handful of various different people that were involved with it. Then the Shalom Wine Group got involved with it, and then eventually the Shalom Wine Group purchased this building here, and we did our first vintage in here in 1994.
Okay, why Horseheaven Hills? What's so unique about that AVA?
It's a very special AVA. We have some incredible viticultural aspects of it that is just great for growing Bordeaux varietals. We're right on the edge of the Columbia River, and obviously one of the biggest benefits is irrigation. I mean, we have unlimited water right there. Because of that river, it also helps us for frost protection when we have to hang these late Bordeaux varietals, into October and November. We still get the warmth of the river to allow us to kind of keep the grapes on the vine. And in certain years when we've had frost in other areas of the state of Washington, we've been protected by the warmth of the river. We also have a big benefit of the wind, believe it or not. The wind is our friend because it actually makes the grapes protect themselves against that wind, and that's how they toughen their skins, and we get our rich tannin and dark structures to our red wines, to our cabs and our Merlot.
What are some of the different things you do with the wine? I know you were talking about the cooperage and the French oak. Talk to me more about that.
Well, the one main thing as a winemaker of wines made from Horseheaven Hills is I try to make the wines that really represent the region. The wines from that area are really known for their big structure, as I mentioned, their big tannins. We age them in French oak barrels for roughly about 2 years, and basically just allow the wines to be what they are. So production-wise, we have probably 6 people that work here in the cellar that do the day-to-day, physical racking of the barrels, during harvest, shoveling the tanks. We have one guy who's been here since the beginning of Canoe Ridge, who's our main cellar master, who I obviously knew back in the day when I was at Shalom. The other guys here have worked either here or at our sister winery, Waterbrook. So they're all familiar with all the procedures and all the game plan of what we do with winemaking here. So we're sort of like a family here. So yeah.
And why did you guys choose, or why did Canoe Ridge choose this spot for the winery?
Well, it just so happened that one of the original investors of the vineyard actually lives across the street here, and this building here was the building that housed the train for maintenance in the early 1900s. The train moved out of here in 1983. It was abandoned. He purchased the building, and when Shalom had decided to build a winery up here, he sold this building to Shalom, and this particular brick building at one point was the whole winery, and we're at the point right now that we've gotten so big that we're jammed up here. We have roughly, between this building and the building across the street, about 4,000 barrels.
Wow. Yeah. And it seems like they preserved a lot of this building, so for someone coming into Wine Taste, they can see some history as well. Exactly.
I mean, we've preserved this building, and it's a very unique building, and if you look around it, it's you can just see the history in it. I mean, if you look at the beams above us here, you can see where a train had a fire here in 1935. But it's very unique. It's a building that people enjoy coming to for events because of the history of it and just the visual aspect of it. So yeah, it's a really cool building. So in 1994, when I came up here, and again being a part of Chalone and seeing what was going on in this town, there was 20-something wineries here. By the time that I came here in 2011, I think there's close to 140, 150 wineries in this town. And it's just amazing to see the growth and see how much great wine is being made from this area right now with all these wineries here. It's a really unique place.
Today on 100% Chance of Wine, we made our way to Spring Valley Vineyard in Walla Walla. I'm joined by the assistant winemaker, Kate, and you have so much history here at the vineyard. You grew up here. You would come out here in the summer from Minnesota just to help out.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So growing up, this land has been in my family since 1865, and so growing up, my parents wanted us to know what the ranch was like and what we had there. And so we would spend summers out here in Walla Walla. Originally, it was here for wheat harvest, and we would jump on the wheat trucks and go to the elevators and ride the combines, and just, the horse trough was our pool that we'd play in and fill it with water. And then when we planted the vineyards, we got to start working a little bit in the vineyards. And
how important is that to you that you grew up on this land and you know kind of the change that has happened?
For me, it's really important, and it's I don't take it for granted whatsoever, and I look at it from the eyes of, I'm the 6th generation that is part of the farming part of this, and I look at it from my perspective. My kid's the 7th generation. My grandfather put the grapes on the property in order to keep it in the family as a commodity crop. And so my job is to keep that going, and whether it's my kids, my husband and I cross our fingers that it is, or my nieces or nephews that want to be a part of it, that we just hope that it keeps going in the family.
Coming here every summer, what are some of the fun memories that you can remember?
Oh boy, well, before the vineyards, during wheat harvest, they would always break for lunch, so the whole crew would stop. And like along the creek, they would make a little circle and eat lunch. And we would always, when they were close to the house, fill up buckets and then go dump water. And then it just turned into a big, huge water fight.
Oh my goodness.
It was fun, and us as little kids, we thought, oh, they're going to love this. But they also are like, we've got to get this work done and stuff. But the crew was really good sports of it. Another thing we did, Papa would take us fishing too, fly fishing. And so really, really special memories with my grandparents and in the fields.
Right. What were your grandparents like?
My grandparents, it's a great question because it's hard, because I think for me working here too, it's two separate, you think of them two separate ways, but at the end of the day, they're my grandparents, and they absolutely loved having us out here. And Papa really liked teaching us and just having us be around, whether it's just sitting next to him in his Kubota, doing the chores with him, or if we're out doing our own thing. But always very supportive, and there for whatever we were involved in, and would come to our events and stuff. And I think just the smiles on their face when we're out here with them makes it all worth it.
So when did the transition happen to vineyards?
So in the early 1990s, wheat is a commodity crop. So we decided, okay, well, what else could we add to keep this in the family? And we had water already, and we had water rights. And so Papa was like, well, maybe we should put a well in and see if we can grow grapes. And so my grandpa and his 2 brothers, Al and Gaynor, all got together and they planted the first rows of the vineyard. And we had an acre of Merlot that we planted in 1993. And it worked. It grew.
Right.
Is kind of what they said. Like, well, it grew. Let's see what else we can do with it. And so we added up to about 45 acres, and we were selling our grapes to local wineries. They were making really good wine with our grapes. We're like, maybe we should try to make some wine.
Yeah.
And so we kind of went that route and started keeping all of our fruit.
Did you find like a natural progression for you into the love of winemaking and in that whole process?
I don't know, Pop and I go back and forth about the age, but he says 10, I say maybe like 13, 14, but we were pulling weeds in the vineyard, and I drove the four-wheeler back to the house, parked it, and I said, this is where I'm gonna live. I just knew it. It's always been in my blood. And so moved out here after college and worked at the tasting room and did all the tours and everything at the vineyard, would spend time on the road. And then I really wanted to start learning more and more about in the winery and making the wine. We had, spent summers racking the wine, just helping wash the barrels and stuff. So I knew about it and I knew the process, but wanted to get my hands dirty. Really wanted to get involved in it. And so 2011, I started full time with Serge, our winemaker, making the wines.
Right.
And it's every year is a learning experience, and it's awesome. Wouldn't change it for the world.
I want to dive more into talking about the wines. You guys work closely together. You have Kate and we have Serge, winemakers. What does an average day look like for you guys?
It depends of the season.
Yeah.
It's farming, so harvest is definitely different from the rest of the year. It's more intense. There is a lot of decision to make. When the wine is actually fermenting, finishing to ferment in the barrel right now during malolactic fermentation, it's a little bit more relaxed. Still, there is a lot of lab work involved. There's a lot of checking on fermentation.
During the summer, we spend at least one day in the vineyard together. Too. It's a lot of together time. Well, with making the wine, and it's.
Serge, you have a unique background coming from France.
Well, I've been exposed to different wine region before I came here. Definitely, yes.
Do you think that helps in making the wine from Spring Valley?
Yeah, it does. It definitely help. Good winemaker should taste wine from all over the world, from the best region in the world. Plus the wine business is in constant evolution. The wine I was drinking 30 years ago are not made the same anymore. The vineyards still around, but definitely an evolution everywhere in the world as far as making wine.
Right.
So.
Each label is someone from your family.
Yes, they're all family members, people who have farmed the land, previous generations. Uriah and Catherine are my great-great-grandparents, and Catherine actually came over from Wales to marry Uriah because his first wife had died during childbirth. And so those are my great-great-grandparents. I was named after Catherine Corcoran. And they had a few sons, one of which was Frederick here. And so Frederick and Nina Lee got married, and those are my great-grandparents. They had one daughter, Sherry Lee is her full name, and she's on this label. Our Petit Verdot is the Sherry Lee label, and she's on her horse, Blandra. And that's my grandma. My grandma, like Papa would tell you, she's the reason we have this. She's the owner. She's the boss. And but she's always behind the scenes. I will put her up against anybody on an Excel worksheet. I can't figure them out, but she runs this place, operations, the books, and everything still to this day. And so this of her on her horse, she didn't want it to be just her face. She wanted it to be like just who kind of she was, and a little bit in the background. So Grandma and Papa and Grandma got married, and that's how the last name Derby came into the family. So that's that label, the Derby label, and it's my grandpa and my uncle on that.
And I'm assuming you could turn the label around and read kind of a little bit about it.
That is exactly what we do. And so the first part of the label is just a brief, quick, who is this person on the front? What did they do? How are they tied into the whole story? And then at the bottom, something Serge has pushed for and that we have wanted for a while is we're going more towards not tasting notes on the back, but we are the place of the vineyard that this came from. Like what blocks did it come from, if it's 100%, or, you know, that more focusing on that,
Right.
the story of it and where it came from in our vineyard, because we are a state, rather than this is what we tasted on this day.
Right.
So.
Today on 100% Chanso Wine, we made our way to Walla Walla, the Walls Vineyard, and I'm joined by the owner, Mike. Of course, I love the name of the vineyard. When I saw it, I'm thinking, ooh, I almost wanted to say my vineyard. But honestly, so where did the concept come up for this winery of yours?
As an outsider here, I used to make jokes about the pen. Because, you know, it's always the, you know, onions, and before even onions and wine, people would know Walla Walla for a lot of things, but that would be one of them. And I always love brands, and you think of a brand in a winery, like there's so many wineries and there's so many names, it's really daunting to think of anything unusual or different that hasn't already been taken.
Right.
And I wanted something that had some connection to the town, honestly. Some of the brands and the wineries in town that I really admired had specific connections to the Walla Walla region, albeit places. And we started making wine down the street here at Artifacts, which is an old cannery that is a custom crush facility, and it is literally in the shadow of the state pen. And as lo and behold, I thought, well, we should pay tribute to this institution. And I mentioned it to a friend of mine, and he went off and researched it and came back with about 100 names, some of which were a little unusual, but turns out one of the nicknames for the jail was the Walls.
Which is very interesting. I had no idea.
And that was kind of the seed that was planted, and I liked it because you could say and spell it and remember it, and it also has something to do with Walla Walla, and that the prison was actually a territorial prison, I learned. It actually predates Washington as a state. So it's a very old institution in town, actually started in Oregon territory. So it's a nice, to me, it just shows the roots of what we're trying to build here.
So one thing when you're looking at the bottle is the artwork.
Yes.
It stands out that it is from your winery. How did you come up with this?
Well, I think, you know, once you come up with a name that is tied to a penitentiary, your next challenge is trying to figure out how do you come up with a label or brand that doesn't immediately evoke people going to the penitentiary from enjoying your wine, which is not something you want to happen. So that was a bit of a challenge, frankly, and I learned a lot about we work with some amazing consultants from Napa Valley and Chicago who helped us through a journey, and then we zigged and zagged all over the place. But and it got to the point where I eventually told them, forget that it's a jail, just do something with the walls.
Right.
And they drew a kind of a rudimentary character of kind of one of our poses where our guy who we call Stanley Groovy is standing on the chair, and I liked it. All of my friends liked it. It looked like a New Yorker cartoon to me. So of course the natural thing for Mark Wiegert, who was someone we were working with, he's like, well, let's go audition some cartoonists. So we did. We found I think about 8, and we gave them each a little bit of money, and they drew that kind of illustration that Mark had drawn, and it turns out the one we liked was drawn by an illustrator named Joe Dater, who is a very talented cartoonist who still draws for a number of publications, including the New Yorker. And
that's awesome.
And that's kind of how we started. And I've been reading that magazine for 25 years, and I think it's just a different look. You know, it's a cartoon, but it's a little, I think it shows that we're not taking ourselves too seriously, but on the same token, we're very serious about what we're doing.
Right.
So I think we're trying to kind of give both messages. We're here to have fun, but we're also very serious about the wines we make.
What are folks' takeaway when they come into your winery and they're trying wine for the first time and they're seeing this place for the first time?
Well, I hope they love the wine. They love the story. I think they love Stanley. We have little pictures of him around here, and it's always a thrill to see people kind of pose like him and get their pictures taken, and they put them on Instagram, which is really a treat to see people kind of pretending to be Stanley Groovy,
Right.
and certainly that's always a thrill. But I think they come away knowing we're fun. Hopefully, we're here to be welcoming, but also we're pretty serious. We're serious about wine, but not in a. We don't want to be kind of snobby, but we want people to really enjoy how much passion and commitment we put into these wines. But we also want them to enjoy themselves and feel like it's approachable. And I hope that's what they feel like when they're here.
More on the wines that you guys have for people here. Let's dive more into those. What are some of those?
You know, we're really focused on the Rocks and Red Mountain. Those are the two big areas. We
Okay.
also pull out of the Columbia Gorge. So out of the Rocks, you know, it's Syrah, it's their own varietals. So currently it's, you know, Concrete Mama Syrah, Mahana Syrah, Concrete Mama Grenache.
Wonderful Nightmare,
Yeah,
which is
Wonderful
our
Nightmare.
Tempranillo.
Oh, I love that name.
Yes.
It's I didn't realize this my first year here at the Walls, how accurate that name was. Tempranillo is really tricky. So when it comes in, it is a nightmare. The 2019 vintage, I was really worried about, but as it went through fermentation, as time went on, it really developed into something beautiful and wonderful.
And you have some wonderful things to work with too, as far as fermenting. You have the eggs and everything back there to make some really great wine. Tell
Oh
me
yeah,
more
we've
about
got great toys.
that. Yes.
It's really nice to have the concrete fermenters. It's another tool in the toolbox. It's something we use quite a bit. It gives you great temperature control. So having those, using a lot of the large format barrels, we do a lot of large format. So it really allows you to control the oak. We're not trying to kill the grapes with tons of oak. We're really trying to let those grapes sing. And, you know, large format, less surface area compared to volume, you really get to dial things in. So it's been an incredible experience here so far. It's knowing what we want to accomplish and the tools that we've got to do it. I'm so happy to be here. It's been amazing.
That is amazing. So when people come in, this is kind of what the layout that you have right now for folks to try wine. So they get a chance to sit down and kind of taste through the wines if they want.
Yeah. No, I think it's important. I love the chance to taste more than one wine at the same time, and I often do that in restaurants.
Right.
Sometimes I get looks from servers like, "Oh, you want 2 glasses?
Yeah.
You've had a bad day." I'm like, "No, I just like to compare wine." And as you can see here, you know, if we're going to do a tasting of 4 wines, we don't want people to have to rush through any wines. And wine changes as you pour it. You know, you could have your first wine and save some of it and be here for half an hour or more, and then go back to that, and you'll notice how it's changed in just that short period of time. So I think those are just some of the nuances of wine tasting, how wine changes after you've opened it, after you've decanted it. And I think that's the neat thing about giving kind of an elevated experience that I think people want, because I think when people come here, they want to taste great wine, but they also want to learn something about wine.
Right.
And I think we endeavor to help teach them in a fun way.
Right. If you had to pick one of those
Let's,
wines down there, what would you pick?
Let's pick a little Mahana Syrah.
Okay.
This is as Hope was saying, this is a rock Syrah from the southern Walla Valley. Mr. Mahana was one of the people who helped start the town of Freewater, which was a rebellion because they had outlawed alcohol in Milton. So he and a bunch of people went north and started Freewater, which is where the Rocks District is. And as I tell someone, I'll always toast and honor anybody who fights prohibition.
That's right. Cheers to that.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.